Hello, my name is Matthew Whitby, and welcome to my PhD&D insights into the creation and discussions around tabletop RPGs. For the people listening, this is essentially a re-recording of a talk that I gave at the IGGI conference, and I just thought, well, I think it is of interest to the tabletop community as a whole, as I've kind of been doing some kind of semi-interesting stuff. So I guess for those who may not know, this is me. As I said before, I'm Matthew Whitby. I'm a third/fourth year PhD student. The reason why I say third/fourth is because I'm still holding out hope that I'm not actually in the final year of my PhD. And I'm studying how to kind of design for perspective challenging experiences in games. So looking to kind of assist developers in including experiences in games that challenge the way the player thinks or feels about certain kind of topics. Kind of alongside my PhD, I've been kind of publishing tabletop RPGs. I kind of really kind of got my roots started in May of 2019, and since then I've published upwards of 50 so titles and in collaborations and all that. So yeah, I feel like I've done a good amount in a short space of time. That said, this talk as a whole is kind of very adjacent to my research. I just really like tabletop RPGs. So I host a podcast called the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse, in which it is a weekly chat with designers all across the tabletop RPG space. I've been running it since December of 2019. We have 85 episodes out to date, and it kind of chats to designers all across the spectrum, from kind of industry professionals to people kind of having their first kind of 2 or 3 products kind of out there. And as the show kind of suggests, it kind of started from being Dungeons and Dragons focused, but over time, as I've kind of spoken to more and more designers, I've again kind of branched out to kind of encompass more than just D&D and tabletop RPGs more generally. So what I've done is I've taken these 85 or so interviews, and I've condensed all the information down, and I'm here to kind of report some of the kind of more curious findings of how some of these designers answer some of the questions. The format is basically, it's quite formulaic. I kind of ask the same questions each and every week. And they kind of have the kind of, as you expect, the introduction, kind of who they are, how long they've been working. But the 4 main questions we're going to be kind of discussing going over today are, what is the designer's creative process? How do their ideas start? What is their most favorite and least favorite part of the kind of project from start to finish? What is a design choice that they've made that they're particularly proud of? This is a question I introduced more recently, so I don't actually have answers from all the designers back from when I started the podcast, because the format shifts over time, but still kind of a good number. And then lastly, the kind of most reflective one is, what's a lesson that you kind of wish you'd learned earlier? So I've collected all these answers, and now I'm just going to kind of show them, discuss my findings. Obviously, this being adjacent to my research, I didn't conduct it in the most rigorous manner. Just to kind of just collect and group as best I can, a very a rudimentary content analysis, of this, lack of a better term. So how do you get your ideas? Where do they really come from? Hands down, the most common one was from pop culture, so stemming from TV shows, comics, video games, films, any of those kind of things, of where they kind of see something and they want to try and bring that thing to life within their kind of RPG of choice, including like a D&D subclass that lets you play as Captain America and throw your shield about, things along that. Another one kind of stems from home games, so where they've kind of put a lot of preparation into kind of preparing something for their own games, and through the process, like, with a little bit of polishing, I can put this in a document and kind of release it. There's also idea lists. I'm sure all of us have a document on our phones or just somewhere where they can just kind of type any random thought into like a long list, and then in between projects you can kind of pick out one of the ideas that grab your attention, or just be like, oh, I don't know what I meant when I wrote down Goblin Cannon, and just kind of expand it from there. Excitement. So this is, I guess, kind of the idea when you are kind of struck by the lightning of inspiration, where something just captures your entire imagination and you can't really focus on anything else until you've gone and made that thing a reality. Which, yeah, I'm sure we've all felt that for like a project every now and then. Design voids. So some designers actively kind of went out of their way to actually identify a problem or spaces in the design of their tabletop RPG, and try to kind of make something to kind of fill that niche. And lastly, again, about 4 or so people, jokes and puns. Sometimes maybe they made a throwaway joke on Twitter, and next thing they know, they're kind of 50,000 words deep in a project, all because of this joke. That's sometimes how these things kind of start. But moving on to kind of their favorite part of the project, there is kind of 8 core chunks that I kind of broke down all the kind of responses into. There's the conceptualize, which is basically the idea generation, outlining, anything involved into the very start of a project where anything goes, you're bringing it to life. Then there's a system design. This is obviously the kind of dealing with the kind of mechanics, working out if there's a kind of like the problem solving of like how to actually make something work, as well as kind of aspects of working with existing systems and making them do what you kind of need them to do. Visualization. This is basically when you're going away and I guess getting involved with a layout artist or commissioning art, or finally getting it like your finished product from like a print house and being able to kind of like physically hold like the product in your hand or see the end product. It's really nice to kind of, I guess, see your work kind of come to life in that manner. Finishing, funny enough, just getting the thing done, just being able to say I'm now done, and kind of get it past that finish line is the favorite part for a non-zero amount of people. The collaboration process, just being able to kind of bounce ideas off each other, work kind of as like in like a project manager role to kind of see a bunch of talented creators come onto a project and again make fantastic work that all comes together in one kind of final product. Narrative writing. So dealing with the creating like characters or the kind of what is called kind of the fluff writing or any kind of, again, if you think of like tabletop RPGs as like almost like a spectrum between like hard mechanics and kind of narrative writing and the kind of the space that can kind of lay in the middle. Writing flow. Again, this is something I'm sure we can all relate to, which is when you're in you're in the flow. You're writing so well that you've lost track of time. Your music stopped playing about an hour ago, but you hadn't even noticed. You're that deep in the flow. And then lastly, like research. So knowing that, oh, for this project, I actually need to go out of my way and find out more information. I need to kind of dig deep and that kind of process of trawling, I don't know, wikis or going to kind of like obscure websites to try and find this weird information that you need to like, oh, I don't know, what is the melting point of obsidian or, you know, what have you. But then so on the other side of the coin, what are some of the least favorite parts? And for this, we kind of have a dreadful 9. Top of the leaderboard in terms of the worst, editing. So actually, once you kind of have the kind of product done, going back in and refining the sentence bit by bit. I know I kind of fall into this category personally. Finishing, it makes another appearance in both the favorite and least favorite. But this is more in a sense of actually getting a project to the finish line. Again, a good chunk of it is either being in the middle of the project or, you know, getting kind of caught in the slog of the last kind of 10%. Design blocks. So again, involved in terms of like both balancing and encountering a situation where your intended design doesn't quite meet the criteria you had or doesn't quite work as intended, and kind of having to, you know, work out what's wrong with it and how can we kind of fix it. Marketing. Unfortunately, the life of a tabletop RPG designer isn't necessarily done when you finish and can like release the product. You then kind of have to put on your marketing hat and try and get it out there. You've released the product onto a marketplace. How do you get it in front of as many eyes as physically possible? Starting. So in this case of like the kind of the paralysis of staring at a blank sheet of paper and working out what am I gonna do with this? Managing people, again, even though collaboration was kind of like a highlight, the kind of other side where things don't necessarily go as planned and you're chasing people up about deadlines, or people have to leave for a project for whatever reason, those can kind of add unnecessary strains or spiky aspects to the project as a whole. And the same with delays. If you're collaborating on a project, you kind of submit your work to the project manager, and sometimes it can be like months where you nothing's being done with or there's other parts of the process kind of holding up, that your work is just kind of in this weird delay limbo. Then there's also the writing itself. Kind of it's similar to kind of starting, but sometimes getting in the process of writing consistently, and kind of bringing out those words, or writing about again, well, I guess in the same way you can kind of encounter a mechanical block, you can encounter like a narrative writing block. And then last but not least, layout. So once the words themselves are all done, taking them into the software of choice and making the kind of surrounding things all pretty once again. Now, what's a design choice that they've been particularly proud of? We kind of broke this down. There was, out of the kind of 80 plus kind of interviews, I had about 32 responses to this. And the most common one was just kind of innovation. And this is kind of whether in terms of innovating within the system, where they're taking kind of things that haven't been done before, or they're thinking outside the box in terms of like a narrative sense, subverting tropes, just taking things that they hadn't necessarily seen done before and kind of bringing it to life in that sense. Following that theme, so those kind of situations where the designer felt they perfectly captured the theme of what they were going for. They wanted to create a book monster, and they kind of realized that, oh, in the past, acid, like ink, used to be somewhat acidic. So giving the book kind of like a slightly acid attack makes sense. It fits the whole theme of everything as a whole. System adaptation, so taking inspiration from systems from other games and bringing them across, or converting them to kind of make something that's kind of stronger on the whole. Balance, again, kind of hitting that fine point where you've created something that again, it is kind of situated perfectly, where players feeling it don't feel underpowered, they don't feel like they're taking the spotlight away from everything else, or again, if you're creating monsters, it doesn't kill everyone instantly. Those kind of things can be a nice, again, it's kind of nice to hit those points, and people kind of have that kind of satisfying feel of like, okay, no, this is how it should be. Process choices, which is literally through the course of from start to finish, making the right decisions to make sure things flow as naturally as they can. And it keeps rearing its ugly head. Puns. One person was very proud of their puns, which I can't blame them for, because even when they're bad, they're good, and when they're good, when they're good, they're still bad. But in terms of what lessons the designers themselves could kind of wish they learned earlier, I've kind of condensed it down to 5 kind of core categories. First and foremost, don't be afraid. Not in terms of like a horror sense. Just don't be afraid to join, to create, to not kind of be affected by what others are kind of creating out there. Don't be afraid to lean into your strengths. If you know you're a really good monster designer, create those monsters. In some cases, don't feel like the rules around it kind of hold you back in any way. Engage in the community. For those who kind of really enjoyed the kind of collaboration process, collaborations themselves are a great way to kind of get started. You don't have to do everything yourself. You're working with someone who maybe has a little bit of experience that you can kind of get a feel for things without jumping completely out of the nest. Self-promotion itself is a skill to hone, and being able to see the others in the community about how they go about promoting is, again, invaluable in its own way. Define your own success. So in some ways, this is like setting your own goals and keeping your project small where possible. Again, if it is incredibly difficult for people to kind of finish their projects, keeping them small from the get-go is one step to kind of make that thing a little bit easier. And you don't have to go all out on commissioning art early. Some people kind of went out of their way to spend money on commissioning art when for their first projects they felt that it wasn't necessary. And price your products what you think they're worth. There's in some places there's the option to kind of set the prices, pay what you want. put, no matter what you think, just put a fixed price to it, because it's something that, again, numerous designers kind of regretted after the fact. And yeah, a lack of sales, it doesn't kind of equal a lack of quality, and that's kind of a mantra you have to keep repeating to yourself. Self-care. I'm really glad that this one came up quite commonly. It's when to say no to a project and be okay not working. And lastly, hire an editor. That came up more more often than not. Key takeaways, though, if we were to bring everything back around to kind of in closing, then designers are like sponges. They take inspiration from everywhere. Even throwaway jokes can be sources of inspiration. It's easy to kind of feel the spark of a new idea, and it is difficult to kind of keep that maintained. Tabletop RPGs designers seemingly dislike the start, middle, and end of a project, depending on who you ask. Just create content, put stuff out there, which is depending on who you're asking is really good advice or bad advice. But perfect is always the enemy of done. And last but not least, hire an editor, please. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. This would be the point where I would ask for any questions. But if this is a video format, you guys can leave the questions down below, and I will get back to you. Again, I'll have links to some of the way that I've conducted this whole study thing, to be as transparent as possible. But yeah, hot damn.